Van Helsing begins in a dark and mysterious world where supernatural creatures exist beyond the understanding of ordinary people. In 1887, a dangerous scientist named Victor Frankenstein has completed an experiment that creates a living creature from dead bodies, believing he can finally conquer the limits of human life. His achievement, however, attracts the attention of Count Dracula, a powerful vampire who wants Frankenstein's creation for his own terrible purposes. When Dracula arrives at the castle, Frankenstein realizes that the monster he created could become a weapon in the vampire's hands. Terrified by what he has unleashed, he tries desperately to protect his creation while also understanding that Dracula will not stop until he gets what he wants. The peaceful world surrounding the castle is about to become the center of a supernatural nightmare. Dracula's arrival brings chaos to Frankenstein's castle as his powerful presence overwhelms everyone inside. The scientist attempts to escape with his creation, but Dracula's enormous strength and supernatural abilities make resistance almost impossible. Frankenstein eventually reaches the point where he must choose between protecting his own life and preventing Dracula from obtaining the creature. His fear becomes overwhelming, and the castle is soon consumed by violence and destruction. When Frankenstein's experiment escapes into the darkness, Dracula is left with unfinished plans and a dangerous obsession. The creature disappears, but Dracula's interest in bringing life to his own monstrous offspring becomes even stronger. The events inside the castle create a chain of horrors that will eventually bring another hunter into the story. 1 year later, the story shifts to Transylvania, where the legendary monster hunter Gabriel Van Helsing is introduced as a warrior working for the Vatican. Unlike ordinary hunters, Van Helsing has spent years fighting supernatural enemies that threaten humanity. He is intelligent, physically capable, and experienced with weapons designed to destroy creatures that normal soldiers could never defeat. His mission has brought him face to face with werewolves, vampires, and other ancient dangers. Although he fights for the church, Van Helsing carries little understanding of his own mysterious past. He remembers almost nothing from his early life, and this missing history creates an important mystery surrounding his identity. For now, however, his attention is focused on a much more immediate threat. Van Helsing is sent to Transylvania with a specific mission involving Count Dracula. The Vatican has learned that Dracula continues controlling the region through fear and supernatural power, while the local Valerious family has sworn to destroy him. For generations, the family has carried a promise to defeat the vampire lord, but none of their efforts have succeeded. Anna Valerious is now the last surviving member of the family and remains determined to continue the fight despite the enormous danger. Van Helsing is ordered to assist her and prevent Dracula from expanding his influence. Before leaving, he receives special weapons and equipment from the Vatican, preparing him for a mission that will require far more than ordinary courage. When Van Helsing arrives in Transylvania, he immediately encounters evidence that Dracula's influence is spreading. The countryside is filled with fear, and the people know that supernatural creatures move through the darkness. Van Helsing soon discovers that Dracula is not the only threat. Werewolves are active in the region, and their attacks are connected to the vampire's larger plans. During one dangerous encounter, Van Helsing finds himself fighting a powerful werewolf and learns how quickly these creatures can transform from human beings into deadly monsters. His experience allows him to survive, but the encounter makes one thing clear. Dracula's forces are more organized and dangerous than he expected. At the same time, Anna Valerious is fighting her own battle against Dracula's creatures. She has spent years trying to protect her family name and fulfill the promise made by her ancestors. Unlike a helpless victim waiting for rescue, Anna is an experienced fighter who understands the dangers surrounding her castle. She carries deep hatred toward Dracula because his presence has destroyed her family and taken away nearly everyone she loved. When Van Helsing arrives, she initially sees him as another outsider who may create more problems than solutions. Their personalities immediately clash, but both recognize that they are facing an enemy too powerful to defeat alone. Van Helsing and Anna eventually discover that Dracula possesses a massive army of vampires and creatures that serve his commands. The vampire lord has been searching for a way to give his offspring physical life, because his vampire children cannot survive without special conditions. Frankenstein's monster contains the secret Dracula needs. If Dracula can capture the creature and use its unique life force, he may be able to bring his countless offspring fully into the world. This would give him an army far larger than anything the people of Transylvania could possibly resist. Van Helsing realizes that protecting Frankenstein's monster is therefore essential, even though the creature itself remains dangerous and unpredictable. The hunt for the monster leads Van Helsing and Anna into increasingly dangerous territory. They encounter Dracula's servants, including his elegant but terrifying brides, who possess incredible speed and strength. These vampire women are determined to capture Van Helsing and Anna before they can interfere with Dracula's plans. Their attacks force the two hunters to rely on each other, and their uneasy partnership begins becoming stronger. Van Helsing's knowledge of supernatural creatures complements Anna's understanding of the local land and Dracula's history. Although they still disagree frequently, both begin recognizing that survival depends upon cooperation rather than individual strength. During the investigation, Van Helsing learns more about the Valerious family and the promise that has controlled Anna's life. Her ancestors vowed that no member of the family would enter heaven until Dracula was destroyed. This means Anna's struggle is not simply personal revenge. She believes defeating Dracula is the only way to complete the responsibility passed down through generations. Van Helsing understands the weight of that burden because his own mysterious past also seems connected to forces he does not fully remember. Their shared uncertainty creates an unusual connection between them, even though neither is ready to discuss what the future may reveal. The investigation eventually leads Van Helsing toward Frankenstein's monster, who has been hiding from Dracula and his servants. The creature is intelligent and frightened, understanding that everyone who searches for him wants to use him for their own purposes. Van Helsing does not see him simply as a monster that must be destroyed. Instead, he recognizes that the creature is capable of thought, fear, and emotion. Protecting him becomes part of the mission because allowing Dracula to capture him could unleash an army of supernatural beings across the world. Anna initially remains suspicious, but she gradually understands that the creature may be their best chance to stop Dracula's plans. Dracula, meanwhile, continues preparing his army inside his enormous castle. He is not satisfied with controlling Transylvania. His goal is to create thousands of living vampires that can spread his power beyond the region. The creature created by Frankenstein is the missing piece of his plan, and Dracula becomes increasingly desperate to capture it. His servants search through villages and forests, while his brides attack anyone who might be protecting the monster. Dracula's power makes him extremely difficult to confront directly, but Van Helsing begins understanding that the vampire also has weaknesses. If they can discover those weaknesses before Dracula completes his plan, they may have a chance to stop him. As Van Helsing and Anna continue their journey, the relationship slowly changes from suspicion to trust. Both have lost people they cared about, and both are willing to risk their lives against an enemy who seems almost impossible to defeat. Van Helsing's mysterious past remains unexplained, but strange connections begin appearing around him. His ability to fight supernatural creatures seems almost instinctive, as though he has been preparing for this battle long before he can remember. Anna notices these details but does not press him for answers. Their immediate priority is surviving Dracula's attacks and keeping Frankenstein's monster away from the vampire's hands. The danger becomes even greater when Dracula's forces close in on them. Van Helsing realizes that every moment they spend moving through Transylvania gives Dracula another opportunity to find them. They need a safe location and a strategy capable of protecting the creature while also discovering how to defeat Dracula permanently. Anna knows the surrounding territory, while Van Helsing possesses weapons and knowledge that may give them an advantage. Their mission now involves more than simply killing a vampire. They must stop an entire supernatural army from being created, protect an innocent creature from being exploited, and uncover the truth behind the ancient evil controlling Transylvania. As the night grows darker, Van Helsing prepares for another confrontation with Dracula's servants. His journey has only just begun, but the scale of the danger is already becoming clear. Frankenstein's monster is the key to Dracula's plan. Anna is the final hope of the Valerious family, and Van Helsing himself may have a connection to the supernatural world that he does not yet understand. With Dracula's forces moving closer and the fate of Transylvania hanging in the balance, Van Helsing realizes that this mission will demand everything he has. The battle between the monster hunter and the vampire lord is only beginning, and the secrets waiting inside Dracula's castle may change Van Helsing's understanding of his own identity forever. Van Helsing and Anna continue their dangerous search for Frankenstein's monster, while Dracula's forces close in around them. They soon discover that the creature has been hiding inside an old windmill, trying to escape the vampire servants. Van Helsing reaches the location just as Dracula's brides attack, determined to capture the monster before he can be moved somewhere safe. A violent battle follows, forcing Van Helsing to use every weapon available to him. Anna also fights desperately, proving that she is far more than a frightened noblewoman. Together, they manage to escape with the creature, but the encounter makes their situation even more dangerous. Dracula now knows that Van Helsing is protecting Frankenstein's creation, and the vampire lord becomes determined to destroy the hunter before he can interfere with his larger plan. After escaping the windmill, Van Helsing and Anna attempt to transport Frankenstein's monster to a safer location. The creature remains frightened because he knows Dracula wants to use him to bring an army of vampire children to life. Van Helsing promises that he will protect him, although the creature remains uncertain whether humans can truly be trusted. Anna slowly begins showing compassion toward him, recognizing that he is not responsible for the horrible circumstances surrounding his creation. Their journey becomes complicated when they realize Dracula's servants are tracking them. Every road appears dangerous, and every delay gives the vampire another opportunity to catch up. Van Helsing knows they need a permanent solution rather than simply running from one attack to another. Their escape eventually brings them to Castle Frankenstein, where they hope to find information about Dracula's plans. Inside the ancient castle, they discover evidence of Victor Frankenstein's experiments and the terrible history surrounding the creature. Van Helsing realizes that Dracula has been searching for the monster since the night Frankenstein disappeared. The creature's body contains an unusual source of energy that Dracula believes can give life to his offspring. If Dracula succeeds, thousands of vampire children could become active at once, creating an army capable of spreading throughout the world. Anna understands the seriousness of the situation and becomes even more determined to destroy Dracula before his plan can be completed. Meanwhile, Dracula continues watching the hunters through supernatural means. He possesses enormous power and seems almost impossible to surprise. But he is also deeply obsessed with completing his experiment. His greatest weakness is his inability to accept failure. The death of Frankenstein did not stop his plan, and the disappearance of the creature only made him more determined. Dracula believes that his power gives him control over everyone around him, including his servants. Yet, Van Helsing's arrival has introduced an enemy he cannot easily intimidate. The vampire lord begins studying the hunter carefully, realizing that Van Helsing's fighting ability and mysterious past may be connected to something much older than their current conflict. Van Helsing and Anna eventually learn that the only way to stop Dracula may involve discovering the secret behind his supernatural existence. Unlike ordinary vampires, Dracula possesses extraordinary abilities that make him extremely difficult to kill. He can transform, control creatures, and survive attacks that would destroy lesser vampires. Anna's family has spent generations searching for a way to defeat him, but every attempt has failed. Van Helsing understands that simply attacking Dracula with ordinary weapons will not be enough. They need to identify his weakness and find a weapon capable of exploiting it. The investigation, therefore, becomes a race against time as Dracula continues preparing his army. The danger increases when Van Helsing encounters a werewolf connected to Dracula's organization. The creature is not simply another monster attacking villagers. It possesses important information about Dracula and the supernatural world surrounding him. Van Helsing discovers that a werewolf can be both dangerous and useful, depending on whether its human side remains strong enough to communicate. The encounter becomes especially important because werewolves possess abilities capable of harming even powerful vampires. Van Helsing begins considering whether this curse could provide the key to defeating Dracula. At the same time, the werewolf's condition reveals how easily Dracula manipulates people and creatures for his own purposes. Anna's determination becomes more personal when she learns that her brother, Welcome, may still be connected to the supernatural events surrounding the castle. Welcome had previously been transformed into a werewolf, and the possibility of losing him permanently has haunted Anna. Her family has already suffered years of tragedy, and she refuses to accept another loss without fighting for him. Van Helsing understands her desperation, even though he knows that supernatural curses often leave little room for rescue. Their mission becomes increasingly emotional because every creature they encounter represents another life destroyed by Dracula's ambition. As they continue investigating, Van Helsing and Anna discover more about Dracula's enormous castle and the experiments taking place inside. The vampire has transformed part of his domain into a laboratory where his servants attempt to create physical bodies for the vampire children. The process is horrifying because the creatures are being treated as experiments rather than living beings. Dracula believes he can control the process completely, but the experiments repeatedly fail. Frankenstein's monster remains the only missing element capable of making the creatures survive. This explains why Dracula is willing to send nearly every servant he possesses after one creature. Van Helsing realizes that protecting Frankenstein's monster is becoming increasingly difficult. The creature is not trained to fight and cannot move as quickly as the hunters. He also fears humans because of the way he was treated after his creation. Anna attempts to reassure him that they are trying to help, while Van Helsing focuses on finding a safe route through the mountains. Their journey becomes a strange partnership between three individuals who would normally have no reason to trust one another. Yet, Dracula's threat forces them together. If they separate, each becomes vulnerable, while staying together gives them a small chance of surviving the vampire's attacks. Dracula's brides eventually locate them again, leading to another violent confrontation. The vampire women attack with incredible speed, forcing Van Helsing and Anna to fight while protecting the creature. One of the brides attempts to separate Frankenstein's monster from the group, but Van Helsing manages to stop her. The battle demonstrates how dangerous Dracula's servants are and how much power they possess even without their master present. Anna fights alongside Van Helsing with increasing confidence, and their partnership becomes more coordinated. They no longer need to explain every movement to each other. Both understand what the other is likely to do, creating the teamwork necessary to survive against supernatural enemies. After the confrontation, Van Helsing realizes that Dracula's attacks are becoming more desperate. The vampire is running out of time because his experiments cannot continue without Frankenstein's monster. This means the hunters have gained an advantage, but only temporarily. If Dracula captures them before they discover how to destroy him, everything will be lost. Van Helsing begins studying the information they have collected and connects it with stories preserved by the Valerious family. The ancient legend suggests that Dracula's power may not be unlimited. Somewhere inside those stories is a clue explaining how the vampire can finally be killed. Anna also begins trusting Van Helsing enough to question his mysterious past. She notices that he reacts strangely whenever Dracula refers to him or recognizes something about him. Van Helsing himself has no clear memory of who he was before becoming a servant of the Vatican. The missing years of his life create a mystery that seems increasingly connected to Dracula. The vampire appears to know more about Van Helsing than Van Helsing knows about himself. This possibility worries Anna because it suggests their battle may be connected to an ancient conflict that began long before either of them understood what was happening. The group eventually reaches a place where they can temporarily hide Frankenstein's monster. Van Helsing and Anna use the opportunity to prepare for their next move. They know they cannot remain hidden forever, and Dracula's supernatural abilities make escape nearly impossible. Their only realistic option is to confront him directly and discover the secret that can destroy him. Van Helsing prepares his weapons while Anna gathers information from her family's records. Frankenstein's monster remains close by, aware that the final confrontation may determine whether he is allowed to live freely or become another tool in Dracula's experiment. The growing bond between Van Helsing and Anna becomes important as the danger increases. Anna has spent years carrying the responsibility of her family alone, while Van Helsing has spent his life fighting supernatural enemies without understanding his own origins. Both are accustomed to relying on themselves, yet the mission has forced them to trust another person. Their partnership gives them strength that neither would possess alone. Anna provides knowledge of Dracula's history and the region, while Van Helsing provides experience against creatures that most people have never even imagined. Together, they begin preparing for the most dangerous stage of their mission. Dracula, meanwhile, makes his own preparations. His castle becomes the center of increasing supernatural activity as his servants work to complete the experiment. The vampire lord is convinced that once Frankenstein's monster is captured, nothing will prevent him from creating the army he has dreamed about. He also believes Van Helsing cannot stop him because the hunter is still unaware of the truth about his own identity. Dracula intends to use that mystery against him, hoping that psychological confusion will weaken Van Helsing before the final battle. But Van Helsing has faced monsters before, and each new revelation only strengthens his determination to uncover the truth. The search for Dracula's weakness eventually leads Van Helsing and Anna toward an ancient secret connected to the vampire's origins. They discovered that Dracula was once a human ruler who made a pact with dark forces, transforming himself into the creature they now fear. His supernatural existence is therefore tied to a specific weakness rather than being completely invincible. The discovery gives Van Helsing hope, but it also reveals the scale of the challenge ahead. Dracula has survived for centuries because very few people have known how to kill him. If Van Helsing can obtain the right weapon and reach Dracula before the experiment is completed, the curse may finally end. As they prepare to enter Dracula's territory, Van Helsing understands that the mission may cost them everything. Anna has already lost almost her entire family, and Frankenstein's monster has nowhere else to go. Van Helsing himself may finally uncover the truth about the mysterious identity hidden behind his forgotten memories. The three of them stand together despite having completely different reasons for fighting. Dracula wants power, Anna wants to fulfill her family's promise, the creature wants freedom, and Van Helsing wants to stop a supernatural threat before it spreads beyond Transylvania. Their paths have now become connected by a single enemy. By the end of this stage, the hunters have learned that Dracula's plan is much larger than simply controlling Transylvania. He intends to create a massive supernatural army using Frankenstein monster, and the experiments inside his castle are already moving closer to completion. Van Helsing and Anna now possess important information about Dracula's weakness, but reaching him will be extremely dangerous. The vampire knows they are coming, and he has surrounded himself with creatures prepared to defend his fortress. With Frankenstein's monster still the key to the entire conflict, Van Helsing prepares to enter the heart of Dracula's kingdom, where the secrets of the vampire's past and his own mysterious identity may finally be revealed. Van Helsing and Anna move closer to Dracula's territory while protecting Frankenstein's monster from the creatures searching for him. Their journey becomes increasingly dangerous as they discover that Dracula's army is much larger than they originally believed. The vampire has filled his castle with servants, experiments, and supernatural creatures waiting for the moment when Frankenstein's creation can be captured. Van Helsing understands that they cannot keep running forever, especially because the monster is becoming weaker and more frightened with every attack. Anna remains determined to protect him because she knows that allowing Dracula to obtain the creature could lead to disaster for everyone. Together, they decide that the only real solution is to take the fight directly to Dracula before his experiment can be completed. As they continue traveling, Van Helsing begins noticing strange details about his own connection to Dracula. The vampire seems to recognize him even though Van Helsing has no memory of ever meeting him before. Dracula's confidence suggests that he knows something about Van Helsing's forgotten past that the hunter himself does not understand. This mystery becomes increasingly disturbing because Van Helsing has spent years accepting his lack of memories without questioning them too deeply. Now, every encounter with Dracula creates another clue that his past may be connected to supernatural forces. Anna notices his uncertainty but encourages him to remain focused on their mission. Whatever happened before Van Helsing became a servant of the Vatican, discovering the truth will have to wait until Dracula is defeated. The group eventually reaches a remote location where Van Helsing believes they can temporarily hide Frankenstein's monster. While Anna stays with the creature, Van Helsing investigates the surrounding area and discovers signs that Dracula's servants have already found their trail. The vampire's ability to track them makes hiding almost impossible. Dracula sends his brides and other creatures into the countryside, searching every possible location. Van Helsing realizes that the vampire is becoming desperate because the experiment inside the castle cannot progress without Frankenstein's creation. This desperation gives the hunters a small advantage. Dracula may possess greater supernatural power, but his obsession with completing the experiment forces him to make increasingly aggressive decisions. Anna's concern for Frankenstein's monster grows as she learns more about his history. He was created by Victor Frankenstein as an experiment, but he never asked to become part of Dracula's plan. His unusual body contains the energy needed to bring Dracula's offspring to life, making him valuable to the vampire, but dangerous to everyone around him. Anna begins seeing the creature as a victim rather than a monster. Van Helsing shares the same view, although he remains cautious because he knows the creature's immense physical strength could become dangerous if he loses control. Their responsibility is therefore not only to protect him from Dracula, but also to make sure he does not become a threat himself. The hunters soon encounter another major danger when a werewolf appears in their path. Van Helsing recognizes that the creature may be connected to Dracula's forces, but he also understands that the human trapped inside the cask could possess information they desperately need. The werewolf's condition creates a difficult situation because the transformation makes him incredibly powerful and unpredictable. Van Helsing must fight while trying to determine whether the creature can still be saved. The encounter becomes especially significant when he discovers that werewolves possess the ability to kill vampires. This revelation gives him a possible weapon against Dracula, but using it will require understanding the curse before it destroys its victim completely. Anna becomes deeply emotional when she recognizes the possibility that the werewolf may be connected to her family. She has already suffered the loss of several relatives because of Dracula, and seeing another loved one transformed into a monster makes her anger stronger. Van Helsing tries to protect her while continuing the fight, knowing that emotional decisions could put all of them in danger. Anna refuses to abandon someone she believes may still be saved. Her determination reminds Van Helsing why she has continued fighting for so long. She's not simply protecting her family name. She's trying to prevent Dracula from taking away the last remaining pieces of her family. Inside Dracula's castle, the vampire's experiments continue. His servants work desperately to bring the unborn vampire children to life, but without Frankenstein's monster, the process remains incomplete. Dracula watches the failures with growing anger and impatience. He has waited for years to create an army capable of spreading his power across the world, and now a single creature is standing between him and his goal. The vampire becomes more determined to capture the monster alive. He also understands that Van Helsing is the greatest obstacle, so he begins preparing a trap designed specifically for the hunter. Van Helsing and Anna eventually discover more information about Dracula's past and the origin of his supernatural powers. Dracula was once a powerful human ruler who became obsessed with conquering death. His transformation into a vampire gave him extraordinary abilities, but it also created a weakness that could eventually destroy him. The Valerious family has spent generations trying to fulfill the promise of killing him, but previous attempts failed because they did not possess enough knowledge or the right weapon. Van Helsing now understands that defeating Dracula will require more than courage. They must combine the information from Anna's family with his own experience fighting supernatural creatures. The search also reveals that Dracula's power is closely connected to his ability to manipulate others. His servants obey him because they fear his punishment, while his brides remain loyal because they depend upon his power. Even the creatures created through his experiments are treated as possessions rather than living beings. Van Helsing recognizes that Dracula's greatest strength is not simply his supernatural abilities. It is his ability to make everyone around him believe resistance is impossible. This understanding gives Van Helsing another advantage. If they can reach Dracula without becoming frightened or controlled by his presence, they may be able to exploit the weaknesses hidden beneath his enormous power. As the group prepares to move again, Dracula's brides attack with renewed determination. The objective is to capture Frankenstein's monster and return him to the castle. Anna fights beside Van Helsing, and their teamwork has now become almost instinctive. She knows when to cover him, while he knows when she needs assistance. The battle is fast and brutal, but they manage to survive long enough to escape. The confrontation also confirms that Dracula knows exactly where they are heading. The hunters can no longer rely on secrecy. Their only hope is to move faster than Dracula's forces and reach the castle before the vampire can complete his experiment. Frankenstein's monster begins showing increasing trust toward Van Helsing and Anna. He understands that they are protecting him rather than trying to use him. For the first time since his creation, he has people willing to risk their lives for him without demanding anything in return. This relationship becomes important because the creature knows he is the key to Dracula's plan. He also understands that his existence places everyone around him in danger. Van Helsing assures him that he is not responsible for Dracula's ambitions. The creature did not choose how he was created, and he should not be punished simply because Dracula wants to exploit him. The journey eventually leads them toward Dracula's enormous castle, which rises above the surrounding landscape like a fortress built specifically to keep the outside world away. Van Helsing knows entering the castle will be extremely dangerous because Dracula will have complete control over the environment. Anna has spent years fearing the place, while Van Helsing understands that once they enter, escape may become impossible. Nevertheless, they have no alternative. Dracula's experiment is approaching completion, and waiting outside will only give him more time. They prepare their weapons and move toward the castle, knowing that the next confrontation may determine the fate of Transylvania. Inside the castle, Dracula welcomes Van Helsing in an unsettling manner, behaving as though their meeting has been expected for a very long time. His confidence immediately makes Van Helsing suspicious. Dracula speaks about Van Helsing as though he knows details about the hunter's identity that nobody else has ever revealed. The conversation creates tension because Van Helsing's missing memories suddenly seem connected to the vampire's history. Dracula refuses to explain everything directly, preferring to keep his opponent uncertain. He knows that psychological confusion can be as dangerous as physical combat, especially when a person is already questioning his own past. Dracula eventually reveals that Van Helsing's connection to him goes back much further than the hunter realizes. Van Helsing may have once been involved in the same supernatural conflict that now threatens Transylvania. The revelation is shocking because it suggests that his current mission is not simply another assignment from the Vatican. His forgotten identity could be connected to the reason Dracula fears him so strongly. Van Helsing refuses to accept Dracula's words without evidence, but the possibility changes how he views himself. For years, he believed his lack of memories was simply an unfortunate mystery. Now, he realizes that someone may have deliberately hidden the truth. Anna remains focused on the immediate danger and refuses to let Dracula's words distract them. She reminds Van Helsing that whatever his past may contain, they still have a mission to complete. Dracula has Frankenstein's monster within reach, and his experiments are close to succeeding. Van Helsing agrees that discovering his identity can wait. Their priority is stopping the vampire before his army becomes unstoppable. The exchange demonstrates how much Anna and Van Helsing now trust one another. Earlier, Anna questioned whether he could be relied upon. Now she is one of the few people capable of keeping him focused when the mystery of his past threatens to overwhelm him. Dracula's castle becomes the setting for a dangerous confrontation as Van Helsing and Anna attempt to reach Frankenstein's monster. Dracula's servants attack from every direction, forcing the hunters to fight through the fortress. The castle is filled with strange machinery and supernatural experiments, revealing how far Dracula has gone in his attempt to conquer death. Van Helsing uses his weapons against the creatures, while Anna searches for the monster. Every room brings another danger, and the hunters realize they are running out of time. The vampire's plan is no longer theoretical. The machinery is active, the experiments are progressing, and the creature they are trying to protect is somewhere inside the castle. Van Helsing eventually discovers the laboratory where Dracula's experiments are taking place. The site confirms his worst fears. The vampire has created countless artificial bodies for his offspring, waiting only for Frankenstein's unique life force to make them viable. Dracula's obsession with creating life has transformed the castle into a place of constant experimentation and suffering. Van Helsing understands that destroying the laboratory may be necessary even if it means risking the creature they came to save. Anna agrees because allowing the experiment to continue would create an army capable of overwhelming every remaining human settlement in the region. The confrontation becomes more dangerous when Dracula appears and attempts to separate Van Helsing from Anna. His supernatural abilities allow him to move quickly and manipulate the environment around them. Van Helsing realizes that fighting Dracula directly without understanding his weakness would be almost impossible. He therefore concentrates on surviving rather than attempting to defeat the vampire immediately. Anna continues searching for the creature while Van Helsing keeps Dracula occupied. Their strategy works temporarily, but Dracula's power remains overwhelming. The vampire knows the hunters have discovered too much, and he becomes increasingly determined to eliminate them before they can escape. Frankenstein's monster eventually becomes involved in the struggle, using his immense strength to protect himself from Dracula's servants. His willingness to fight surprises Anna because she has begun seeing him as vulnerable rather than dangerous. The creature understands that if Dracula captures him, the consequences will be catastrophic. He therefore chooses to help the people who protected him. Van Helsing sees this as proof that the creature is capable of making his own choices despite the circumstances of his creation. Dracula, however, views the creature only as a necessary component of his experiments and becomes furious when he refuses to submit. As the battle intensifies, Van Helsing and Anna realize that their only chance is to escape the castle with Frankenstein's monster and find the weapon capable of killing Dracula. The information they have gathered is finally beginning to make sense. The vampire is powerful, but not invincible. A specific weakness exists, and if they can exploit it, Dracula's centuries of control could finally end. The problem is that reaching the final confrontation will require them to survive the castle's defenses first. Every corridor is filled with creatures, every servant is searching for them, and Dracula himself is determined to prevent their escape. By the end of this stage, Van Helsing, Anna, and Frankenstein's monster are trapped inside Dracula's fortress, while the vampire's experiment approaches completion. Van Helsing has also learned that his own forgotten identity may be connected to Dracula in ways he never imagined. The discovery creates a personal mystery beneath the larger battle, but there is no time to investigate it fully. Dracula's army is almost ready, and the hunters must find a way to escape, uncover the vampire's final weakness, and return to the castle for one last confrontation. With the fate of Transylvania hanging in the balance, the most dangerous part of Van Helsing's mission is about to begin. Van Helsing, Anna, and Frankenstein's monster are trapped inside Dracula's castle, surrounded by creatures and servants determined to stop their escape. The enormous fortress is filled with strange machinery, dark laboratories, and evidence of Dracula's centuries-long obsession with creating life. Van Helsing realizes that the vampire has brought them exactly where he wants them, but the hunters refuse to surrender. Anna searches for a way to reach the creature, while Van Helsing confronts Dracula's servants. Their situation becomes increasingly desperate because Dracula's experiments are nearing completion. If Frankenstein's monster is captured and connected to the machines, Dracula will finally have the power to bring his vampire offspring to life. Every minute they remain inside the castle makes the consequences more dangerous. Dracula finally reveals more about Van Helsing's mysterious past, suggesting that the hunter was once connected to the supernatural world long before he began serving the Vatican. Van Helsing struggles to understand why the vampire seems to recognize him so well. Dracula's words awaken fragments of memories that Van Helsing cannot fully explain. Yet, he refuses to let the mystery distract him from the immediate mission. Anna reminds him that whatever happened in his forgotten past, Dracula remains the enemy responsible for destroying her family and threatening countless lives. Van Helsing regains his focus and prepares to continue fighting. The truth about his identity will have to wait until they survive the castle. The hunters manage to reach Frankenstein's monster, but Dracula's servants quickly surround them. Van Helsing uses his weapons to create an opening while Anna helps the creature escape. The monster is terrified but understands that remaining inside the castle will allow Dracula to use him. He follows Van Helsing and Anna despite knowing that his own existence has become the center of the conflict. Dracula becomes increasingly furious as his plan begins falling apart. He orders his servants to capture the creature at any cost, making the escape even more dangerous. Van Helsing realizes that protecting the monster is no longer enough. They must destroy Dracula's laboratory and prevent the experiment from ever being completed. A fierce battle erupts inside the castle as Van Helsing fights through Dracula's forces. The hunter uses silver bullets, explosive weapons, and his physical strength to defeat the creatures attacking him. Anna fights beside him with equal determination, refusing to retreat despite the danger. Their partnership has become one of the strongest advantages they possess. Neither needs to depend entirely on the other, but both understand how to work together under pressure. Frankenstein's monster also begins defending himself, using his tremendous strength against the creatures that attempt to drag him back toward the laboratory. For a brief moment, the three unlikely allies manage to push Dracula's forces backward. Dracula, however, remains confident because he knows Van Helsing cannot fight his entire army forever. He continues manipulating the situation from within the castle, using his supernatural abilities to appear almost everywhere at once. His greatest advantage is that he knows the castle completely, while the hunters are constantly moving through unfamiliar rooms. Dracula also understands that Van Helsing has not fully recovered from the revelations about his identity. The vampire attempts to use those doubts against him, suggesting that the hunter's past may be more terrifying than anything he is currently fighting. Van Helsing refuses to believe Dracula's manipulation, but the questions remain in his mind. Anna discovers that her family's ancient records contain information about Dracula's weakness. The Valerious ancestors spent generations searching for a way to destroy the vampire, and their research finally gives Van Helsing the clue he needs. Dracula cannot be killed through ordinary weapons. He must be attacked in a specific way that takes advantage of the supernatural curse sustaining him. The discovery gives the hunters hope, but they still need the right opportunity to use it. Dracula is too powerful to confront without preparation, and his army surrounds the castle. They must first escape with Frankenstein's monster and gather everything necessary for the final battle. The escape becomes even more difficult when Dracula's brides attack again. Their speed and supernatural strength make them extremely dangerous, but Van Helsing and Anna have become more experienced fighting them. Anna uses her knowledge of their behavior to anticipate their movements, while Van Helsing focuses on delivering the final attacks. The battle is chaotic, but the hunters manage to eliminate the immediate threats. Frankenstein's monster watches in fear, realizing how many creatures have been destroyed because Dracula wants to use him. Van Helsing reassures him that none of this is his fault. The monster begins understanding that he has the right to choose his own future, rather than becoming a tool for another person's ambition. As they move through the castle, Van Helsing discovers that one of Dracula's greatest weaknesses is connected to the werewolf's curse. A werewolf possesses the power to kill a vampire, making the creature potentially valuable in the final confrontation. Unfortunately, the curse is temporary and eventually destroys the human personality trapped inside it. Van Helsing realizes that using a werewolf against Dracula may come with a terrible cost. Nevertheless, they may have no other choice. Dracula has survived for centuries because he has rarely faced an enemy capable of matching his supernatural abilities. The werewolf's strength could finally give Van Helsing the advantage he needs. Anna is devastated by the possibility that someone close to her may be lost permanently because of the curse. She has already watched her family disappear one member at a time, and the thought of another death becomes almost unbearable. Van Helsing understands her pain, but also knows that Dracula's plan cannot be allowed to continue. Their mission has reached the point where every decision carries a cost. Anna ultimately chooses to keep fighting because she knows that surrender would make all the sacrifices meaningless. Her determination becomes stronger rather than weaker, even as the danger becomes more personal. Meanwhile, Dracula's experiments begins producing signs of success. His vampire offspring are almost ready to become physically alive, and the machinery inside the laboratory becomes increasingly active. Dracula believes that victory is within reach. He orders his servants to capture Frankenstein's monster immediately, knowing that the creature is the final component required to complete the process. The castle becomes a battlefield as both sides race toward the same objective. Van Helsing knows that destroying the laboratory could stop Dracula's plan, but doing so while the creature is still nearby could also place his life at risk. Van Helsing and Anna eventually find a way to sabotage part of the laboratory. Explosions and destruction spread through the castle as Dracula's machines begin collapsing. The vampire watches his life's ambition disappear before him and reacts with uncontrollable anger. His obsession with creating an army has made him careless, and the distraction gives the hunters an opportunity to escape. Frankenstein's monster is able to move away from the machinery, while Van Helsing and Anna fight their way toward an exit. Dracula follows them, unwilling to accept defeat after centuries of preparation. The escape leads to a final confrontation with Dracula's forces outside the laboratory. Van Helsing realizes that Dracula's greatest strength is also his greatest weakness. He believes himself invincible and therefore underestimates opponents who refuse to be intimidated. Van Helsing uses this arrogance against him, drawing Dracula into a position where the hunter can prepare for a direct attack. Anna helps keep Dracula's servants away, while Frankenstein's monster tries to reach safety. The plan is dangerous, but it gives Van Helsing the opportunity he needs to confront the vampire without facing the entire army simultaneously. During the struggle, Van Helsing's own supernatural abilities become more noticeable. His movements are faster and more powerful than those of an ordinary human, and Dracula's reaction suggests that he recognizes something ancient within the hunter. Van Helsing begins experiencing flashes of his forgotten identity, but he cannot fully understand them. Dracula seems almost certain that Van Helsing is connected to a legendary figure from his past. The mystery remains unresolved, yet it becomes clear that Van Helsing's destiny is tied to the battle. He was not sent to Transylvania by accident. Somehow, his forgotten history has brought him directly back to Dracula. Anna and Van Helsing finally manage to escape the castle with Frankenstein monster. They reach safety temporarily, but Dracula's forces continue pursuing them. The vampire's army has suffered damage, but Dracula himself remains alive and extremely dangerous. Van Helsing now possesses the information needed to kill him, while the possibility of using the werewolf curse gives him another advantage. The final confrontation will require perfect timing. One mistake could allow Dracula to recover and complete his plan. Van Helsing knows that he may not survive the battle, but he also understands that allowing Dracula to escape would endanger far more people. Before the final battle, Van Helsing prepares his weapons and checks the information gathered from Anna's family. He knows exactly what must happen, but the emotional weight of the mission is becoming heavier. Anna has lost almost everything because of Dracula, while Frankenstein's monster simply wants freedom from the forces trying to control him. Van Helsing himself is beginning to realize that the mystery of his past may never be fully explained unless Dracula is defeated. The three prepare together, understanding that the coming confrontation will determine whether Dracula's centuries of power finally come to an end. Dracula launches his final assault, sending his remaining creatures toward the hunters. Van Helsing and Anna fight desperately while trying to keep Frankenstein's monster protected. The battle becomes increasingly chaotic as supernatural creatures attack from every direction. Van Helsing eventually finds himself facing Dracula directly, and the vampire reveals that he has been waiting for this confrontation for much longer than Van Helsing understands. The hunter's memories begin returning in fragments, connecting him to an ancient conflict involving Dracula. Instead of allowing the revelation to frighten him, Van Helsing uses it as motivation. He may not remember everything about his past, but he knows exactly what he must do now. After Dracula's defeat, the terrible darkness surrounding Transylvania finally begins to disappear. His army of vampires is destroyed, his experiments have failed, and Frankenstein's monster is no longer being hunted for his unique ability to create life. Van Helsing and Anna return from the final battle exhausted but relieved that the greatest threat to her family has finally ended. For Anna, however, victory does not feel complete because the Valerious family has suffered enormous losses over generations. She has spent her entire life believing that defeating Dracula would bring peace to her family. But she now realizes that peace can also come with painful memories. Van Helsing stays beside her, understanding that there are some wounds that cannot be healed simply because an enemy has been defeated. Frankenstein's monster is finally given the opportunity to choose his own future. For the first time since his creation, he is not being treated as an experiment or a weapon. Dracula wanted to use his body for an army, while Victor Frankenstein originally created him to prove that life could be manufactured. Van Helsing and Anna are different because they recognize that the creature deserves freedom. Although he looks frightening, his actions throughout the journey prove that he is capable of loyalty, gratitude, and compassion. He has helped the people protecting him even when running away would have been easier. Now that Dracula is gone, he can finally leave Transylvania and search for a place where he will not be judged only by his appearance. Anna's thoughts remain focused on her family. The Valerious ancestors made a promise that Dracula must be destroyed before they could finally rest, and Van Helsing's victory means that promise has been fulfilled. Yet Anna is now the last surviving member of the family, and the responsibility that controlled her entire life has suddenly disappeared. For years, she always had a mission waiting in front of her. Every decision was connected to defeating Dracula. Now she must consider what life means without that mission. Van Helsing understands how strange that feeling can be, because he too has spent years following orders without fully knowing where his own life began. Their shared uncertainty brings them even closer. Van Helsing also begins reflecting on everything that happened since he arrived in Transylvania. He came to the region as a hunter, following a simple mission from the Vatican, expecting to fight another supernatural enemy. Instead, he discovered a world filled with ancient curses, family promises, vampires, werewolves, and mysteries surrounding his own identity. The experience changes the way he sees his role. He still knows that monsters must sometimes be stopped, but he has also learned that appearances can be misleading. Frankenstein's monster was feared because of how he looked, while Dracula could appear elegant and powerful despite being responsible for countless deaths. Van Helsing now understands that true character is revealed through choices rather than appearance. The emotional cost of the battle becomes clearer as Anna and Van Helsing return to the Valerious castle. The place that once represented generations of struggle against Dracula is now strangely quiet. There are no servants preparing for attacks, no creatures hiding in the darkness, and no fear of Dracula's return. The silence feels unfamiliar because Anna has spent so long expecting danger. She walks through the castle remembering her family members and everything they sacrificed. Van Helsing gives her space to grieve rather than telling her to move forward immediately. He knows that defeating Dracula does not mean Anna must forget the people she lost. Their memories remain part of the reason the victory matters. Van Helsing's own memories also continue troubling him. Dracula's revelation suggested that Van Helsing's connection to the supernatural world began long before his current mission. Although the full details remain mysterious, Van Helsing now understands that his life has been shaped by forces he cannot completely remember. Instead of becoming frightened by this uncertainty, he accepts that his identity is defined by what he chooses to do in the present. He fought to protect Anna and Frankenstein's monster not because someone forced him to, but because he believed it was right. That realization gives him a sense of control over a life that has always contained unanswered questions. Anna and Van Helsing share a quiet moment as they recognize how much their relationship has changed. At first, Anna considered him an outsider who might interfere with her family's mission. She distrusted his methods and questioned whether he understood what Dracula had done to her family. Over time, his actions proved that he was willing to risk his life for her without asking for anything in return. Van Helsing also came to respect Anna's courage and determination. She was never simply someone he needed to protect. She became a partner capable of standing beside him during battles that would have terrified most people. Their connection grew because both were willing to face danger together. The death of Dracula also removes the fear that controlled the people of Transylvania for generations. Villagers can finally begin rebuilding their lives without expecting supernatural attacks every night. The land around the castle becomes a symbol of freedom rather than terror. For Anna, this matters because her family's mission was never only about personal revenge. They wanted the people of their homeland to live without Dracula's influence. Now that he is gone, the Valerious promise has achieved its true purpose. Anna can finally look beyond the walls of the castle and imagine a future that is not completely defined by the vampire who destroyed her family. Frankenstein's monster eventually leaves the group, knowing that staying near them could continue attracting danger. His departure is bittersweet because Van Helsing and Anna have become the closest thing he has had to friends. Before leaving, he expresses his gratitude for their protection. Van Helsing understands that the creature deserves the chance to live according to his own choices. The monster disappears into the distance, carrying the memory of the people who treated him as a living being rather than a scientific experiment. His future remains uncertain, but for the first time, that uncertainty belongs to him rather than Dracula or Victor Frankenstein. Van Helsing and Anna then face the painful reality that their journey must eventually end. They have fought together through castles, forests, laboratories, and supernatural battles, but the mission that brought them together is finished. Van Helsing must eventually return to the Vatican, while Anna must decide what to do with the life she has left. Neither knows exactly what the future will look like. Their time together has changed them permanently. And even if their paths separate, the experiences they shared will remain important. The battle against Dracula has ended, but the emotional connection created through that battle is not something either of them can simply forget. As Anna looks toward the future, she can finally imagine living without constantly preparing for Dracula's return. She no longer needs to guard every doorway or carry the responsibility of protecting a family promise that has already been fulfilled. The freedom is frightening at first because she has never known anything else. Van Helsing encourages her to remember that her family fought so she could eventually have this freedom. Their sacrifice was not meant to trap her in endless grief. It was meant to give her a chance to live. Anna begins accepting that continuing to live does not betray those she lost. It honors them by allowing the future they fought for to finally exist. Van Helsing also recognizes that his journey has changed his understanding of courage. At the beginning, he approached every supernatural battle as a professional hunter, relying heavily on weapons and experience. By the end, he understands that courage is not simply the ability to fight monsters. It is also the willingness to protect someone when there is no guarantee of survival. To trust another person when doing so creates vulnerability, and to continue moving forward when the past remains unclear. Anna and Frankenstein's monster taught him lessons that no weapon could provide. His mission may have begun as an assignment, but it ends as a deeply personal experience. The memory of Dracula remains powerful even after his destruction. He was not simply another monster, he was a figure whose ambition lasted for centuries, and his desire to conquer death created suffering for countless people. His defeat demonstrates that even seemingly immortal power can eventually collapse when someone refuses to accept fear as permanent. Van Helsing never became stronger than Dracula simply because he possessed better weapons. He succeeded because he found allies, discovered the vampire's weaknesses, and remained determined when the odds seemed impossible. Dracula's greatest mistake was believing that power alone guaranteed victory. Anna's grief eventually becomes quieter as she remembers the people she lost. Instead of focusing only on the pain, she can begin remembering their lives before Dracula's influence destroyed them. This is an important change because her family is no longer defined only by tragedy. The Valerious name now carries the memory of people who refuse to surrender for generations. Anna is the final person to carry that legacy, but she no longer has to carry it through endless fighting. Her family's promise has been completed, allowing her to preserve their memory through the life she chooses to build afterward. The castle itself becomes a reminder of everything that has changed. Once filled with supernatural activity and Dracula's servants, it now stands silent after the destruction of his empire. The place where fear ruled for centuries has become empty. Van Helsing and Anna can finally leave without expecting another attack from the darkness. Their journey through the castle has transformed it from a symbol of death into a symbol of victory. Every destroyed laboratory and abandoned corridor represents another part of Dracula's power that can no longer return. The silence is not frightening anymore. It represents the peace that Anna's family spent generations trying to achieve. Van Helsing's departure becomes inevitable as the Vatican expects him to return. He has completed the mission assigned to him, but he carries much more than a simple report. He now knows that his life contains mysteries that may never be completely solved. Still, he no longer believes that every unanswered question must control his future. He can continue fighting supernatural threats while carrying the lessons learned in Transylvania. His memories may remain incomplete, but his choices are clear. He protected people who needed him, defeated a creature that threatened the world, and refused to allow fear to determine who he became. Before leaving, Van Helsing and Anna share one final emotional farewell. Their relationship has become one of the most important parts of the entire journey, yet neither needs to promise that everything will remain the same. They both understand that life will move forward. Anna now has the freedom to rebuild her future, while Van Helsing must return to the work that has defined his life. Their connection remains meaningful because they face something together that neither could have survived alone. The sadness of separating does not erase the happiness of what they experienced. Instead, it shows how deeply the journey changed both of them. The final moments also remind Van Helsing of the people who died during the battle. Victory cannot bring them back, and he understands that protecting others sometimes comes with painful sacrifices. Yet, he chooses to remember them rather than allowing their deaths to become meaningless. Anna does the same with her family. Their losses become part of the story that allows future generations to live without Dracula's terror. The battle may be finished, but its consequences will remain in their memories. Both Van Helsing and Anna leave the experience stronger, not because they avoided suffering, but because they learned how to continue despite it. As Van Helsing prepares to leave Transylvania, the land that once felt completely foreign now carries powerful memories for him. He arrived as a stranger and leaves with a connection to people and events that changed his understanding of himself. Anna watches him depart, knowing that their paths may never be exactly the same again. Frankenstein's monster has also disappeared into the world, finally free from the chains of Dracula's ambition. The three individuals who began the journey as strangers have each gained something important. Anna gained freedom, the creature gained a chance at life, and Van Helsing gained a deeper understanding of what it means to choose his own path. The story ultimately shows that defeating Dracula was only one part of the journey. The greater victory was breaking the cycle of fear that had controlled so many lives. Anna no longer has to live under her family's ancient burden. Frankenstein's monster no longer belongs to anyone's experiment, and Van Helsing no longer sees his missing past as something that must define him. Dracula wanted to control life and death, believing that power could give him everything he desired. Instead, his obsession destroyed him. The people he tried to control survived because they chose courage, loyalty, and sacrifice over fear. By the end, Transylvania is finally free from Dracula's influence, and the long nightmare surrounding the Valerious family has reached its conclusion. Van Helsing leaves behind the castle, the battles, and the mysteries that changed him forever. Anna remains to begin a new chapter of her life, carrying the memories of her family without being imprisoned by their past. Frankenstein's monster disappears into an uncertain future, but at least that future belongs to him. The darkness that once seemed impossible to defeat has finally been destroyed, proving that even the most powerful evil can fall when people are willing to stand together against it. After Dracula's defeat, the darkness that controlled Transylvania finally disappears. His army is destroyed, his experiments have failed, and the Valerious family's centuries-long mission is finally complete. Anna has lost almost everyone she loved, but she can now live without the fear of Dracula returning. Van Helsing remains beside her as they remember the people who sacrificed themselves during the battle. For Anna, the victory is both emotional and painful because defeating Dracula cannot bring her family back. Still, she understands that their sacrifices were not meaningless. They fought for a future where their descendants could live freely, and now that future has finally arrived. Frankenstein's monster is also finally free from Dracula's control. Throughout the story, everyone wanted something from him. Victor Frankenstein wanted to prove that he could create life, while Dracula wanted to use him to create an army. Van Helsing and Anna were different because they recognized that the creature deserved the right to choose his own future. He leaves them knowing that he may never find a perfect home, but at least his life now belongs to him. His appearance may frighten people, but his actions proved that he could show loyalty, courage, and compassion. His journey becomes another reminder that true character cannot be judged simply by appearance. Van Helsing's own journey has changed him deeply. He arrived in Transylvania as a professional monster hunter, following orders from the Vatican and believing that his mission was simply another battle against evil. Instead, he discovered Dracula's connection to his mysterious past and learned that his identity contained secrets he had never understood. Although many questions remain unanswered, Van Helsing no longer allows his forgotten history to control him. He knows who he is through the choices he makes in the present. He protected Anna, defended Frankenstein's monster, and risked his life to destroy Dracula. Those actions define him more than any forgotten memory ever could. Anna and Van Helsing share a final emotional farewell. Their relationship began with suspicion, but through countless battles they developed trust, respect, and affection. Anna no longer sees Van Helsing as an outsider sent to interfere with her family's mission. He became someone who stood beside her when almost everyone else was gone. Van Helsing also learned that Anna was not simply someone he needed to protect. She was a brave warrior who fought alongside him and helped defeat one of the most powerful supernatural creatures in existence. Their separation is painful, but both understand that the journey they shared will remain an unforgettable part of their lives. As Van Helsing prepares to leave Transylvania, he looks back at everything that happened. He remembers Frankenstein's castle, the werewolf battles, Dracula's brides, the terrifying laboratory, and the final confrontation inside the vampire's fortress. What began as a simple mission became a battle involving ancient curses, family promises, and his own forgotten identity. Van Helsing realizes that fighting monsters is not only about weapons and strength. Sometimes the greatest challenge is choosing to protect someone who cannot protect themselves. Sometimes courage means continuing even when victory seems impossible. These lessons will remain with him wherever his next mission takes him. Anna finally begins accepting that her life can continue beyond the Valerious family's ancient promise. For years, every decision she made was connected to Dracula. Now, she can remember her family without being trapped by their unfinished battle. Their promise has been fulfilled, and the future they fought for belongs to her. The castle may still contain memories of everything she lost, but it no longer represents fear. Dracula is gone, and the people of Transylvania can finally live without his shadow. Anna's future remains uncertain, but for the first time, uncertainty feels like freedom rather than danger. Van Helsing leaves behind a wall that has been changed by the destruction of Dracula. Frankenstein's monster disappears into the distance. Anna remains with the memories of her family, and the vampire's centuries-long reign becomes nothing more than a dark chapter in Transylvania's history. The heroes have survived, but they are not the same people who began the journey. Anna has gained freedom, the creature has gained a chance to live, and Van Helsing has gained a deeper understanding of himself. Their victory proves that even the strongest evil can eventually fall when courage, loyalty, and sacrifice stand together against it. In the end, Van Helsing is more than a battle between a monster hunter and a vampire. It is a story about facing darkness, protecting those who cannot protect themselves, and discovering strength through sacrifice. Dracula believed that immortality and power would allow him to control everything, but his obsession ultimately destroyed him. Van Helsing, Anna, and Frankenstein's monster survive because they choose something completely different: trust, courage, and freedom. Their journey through Transylvania may be over, but the memories of everything they experienced will remain with them forever. And that was the complete story of Van Helsing 2004. A dark supernatural adventure filled with vampires, werewolves, monsters, mystery, and unforgettable battles. From Van Helsing's dangerous mission to Anna Valerious' fight for her family and Frankenstein's monsters' search for freedom, every character faces a different kind of struggle before the final battle with Dracula. If you enjoyed this movie story and want more Hollywood movie reviews and complete story explanations, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next movie story.